All right, so today we're going to talk about how to actually win a contract, and a contract that has block hours as well. We'll be using Crete Solutions as the example today. So first thing we're going to do is double check the opportunity itself and see what the quote looks like so we know what we're dealing with here. And we can actually see that this particular opportunity has actually already been closed. However, we actually even made the contract too. We'll show that in a second. It was a mistake on the front end. But oftentimes we will win a contract in advance, and we'll have to do so to create the post-sale ticket and start the contract, but we don't yet have a start date for the contract, so we haven't made that piece. So this is a great example because we actually have a protection plan in place for the gold services as well as a cloud hosting and block hour contract with 2 prepaid hours at $90 per hour. So we are billing them on the front end, so that's very important to note. We are charging them up front for the block hours. We'll deal with that later once we actually do the block hour contracts. So we're going to go ahead and win the opportunity, and it's going to give us a warning because we've already won the opportunity once, but that's okay. So we see it's in a stage 5 closed stage, which is fine. We already won it once. So we're going to go ahead and move through here in just a second. And I apologize if the audio is a little wonky. The first time I recorded it, my microphone was not working, so I'm having to go back and re-record this audio over the video track. All right, so we're going to click Next here. So we do not want to create another ticket because we've already done this once. We do not want a duplicate ticket, so we're going to make sure we uncheck that. And they don't have an existing contract, so we're not going to choose Add Services. So we're going to go ahead and just create the recurring service contract from scratch. We're going to give it a name, and the name we have here is just fine. We know the start date is going to be this coming Monday, so we're going to go ahead and choose September 3rd. And it is a monthly contract. That's important to note. If it was annual, we change it there. And we're going to have it end after 12 occurrences or 12 months. Now down beneath here, we do not want to bill them twice for all the one-time items, all the initial solution items on the quote. So we're going to uncheck all of that there. If not, it's going to double bill them or put the charges in the system. So that's everything under the initial solution piece of the quote here. We have already billed them for that once. We do not want to do that twice. So very important to note. If we were doing this all at once, we would have selected the ticket to create and done the charges. But since that's not the case, we're doing this a little bit differently. We make sure that we have allowed the contract to finish. It's not spinning in the upper left anymore. We're going to make sure of that before we hit the close button, or else we're going to have a problem. So we've opened up the contract. We're going to double check and just make sure the services show up. And as we can see, the block hours are showing up, the virtual desktops are showing up at the right rates, and the gold workstations are showing up too. So all of that looks good to go. We'll close out of that. Next thing we're going to do is actually get the company back and go to the contracts page itself to see what we're dealing with. And so here you can see we actually have the mistake. It looks like when the opportunity was won the first time, the contract was created on the front end and a start date was put for August 1st. But here we are a month later starting the contract. So this project got delayed, the estimated start date was not valid, and so we're going to have to go back and fix that because it's going to actually end up double billing the customer. And if you go to try to delete the old contract, it's going to say it can't be deleted because it contains items that have already been billed. And so we're going to actually have to go back and fix that here in just a moment. And just for educational purposes, I'm going to show you what to do if this does happen. So what we've got here is we've actually gone into the recurring contract section and gone to Approve and Post and selected the company and the right dates. And we've seen that we do have items from the 1st of August for this contract. And it's right here ready to be invoiced. It's definitely not a good thing because if we don't fix this, it's going to end up charging them for an extra month. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're actually going to push these items through the system, but first we're going to change the billable amount to $0 just to be on the safe side. So we're going to void this out just so we don't accidentally bill them for anything. It doesn't skew our numbers in the system. We're going to approve and post, but first we have to save those changes for the price. Now we approve and post. Next, we're going to go to items to invoice. And here it is, $0 invoice. And we're going to process that through the system. And once we do that, we're going to trick the system to not synchronize this invoice over with QuickBooks. So we go to the invoice history, we find the invoice, and in the invoice number field, anytime we type something that's not the actual invoice number, which is 32669, anytime we type something and save that, it will not push that invoice over to QuickBooks. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do right now. So I'm just going to type in do not sync. And in just a moment here, we're going to go ahead and save that. All right, so that's been saved. So we're going to come back over to the contracts now, and we take a look, and we still see both. So what I'm going to do is on the old one, I'm going to edit the contract and make it inactive. And I'm also going to tell it to only to have a sooner end date. So it's going to end after one billing cycle, one occurrence, 1 month. So that's happened now. We're going to go back in and double check this and look at the stop date. And the end date is 8/31/2018, and the new one starts on 9/3. So these do not overlap at this point. Now it's time to make this inactive. Once again, you can't delete a contract that's been billed. So now it's inactive. We go back and double check, and the contract is now gone. So now we have one contract here we're dealing with. So what do we do about the block hour contract and extra billing? Because right now we've only dealt with the recurring service contract. So we have to go back in and actually make the block hour contract. So we're going to do that here in just a second. So we go to new and then block hour contract. We're going to give it a name, and I just like to use block hour contract. It's not going to be the default service desk contract. We don't want to hit that contract first, but we'll deal with that here in just a few minutes and show you how that works. We're going to go ahead and set the start date though for the same start date as the other contract, which is 9/3/2018. And the end date is also going to overlap, which will be 9/2/2019. All right, we don't fill out much here, but we do have a contract category. Right now we just have Wilmington and Jacksonville, but let's just choose Wilmington for now. That's default, and we'll hit next. We don't worry about user-defined fields. We hit next. We do want to make sure that approve and post overage billing is checked. That's a big deal. And we want to make sure that the rate is set for $100 per hour. That's our current overage billing rates for any time we go over the prepaid $90 an hour piece of it. So we leave that as 100. Also, we do want to make sure that it's always set to manually approve and post labor. We do not want anything to be done automatically. That would be a big problem where Matt would not have a chance to review time entries. All right, we'll click next. All right, here has every single rate and I wouldn't say really, it is a work type basically. So every single one of our work types has a billing rate, which we can't change here. The big deal is the block hour multipliers. So that means that, for every hour we work for a particular work type, how many hours do we pull out of the block hour contract? Well, we want to keep that as a 1-to-1 ratio for pretty much everything but after hours support. And we have 2 billing codes for after hours support, and we're going to change those to 1.5 multipliers. So for every hour of work we do, we're going to pull out 1.5 hours. So we're going to do that for emergency technician, and we're also going to do that for remote support after hours. Now we'll find this later, but I typed in 150 instead of 1.5, so I screwed that up, but we'll find that mistake here in just a moment. We'll hit next, and then we're going to hit finish. This will actually bring up the screen to create the block purchase. So once again, we're creating monthly blocks, 2 hours per block. And we're going to be checking this box here to roll over the unused hours. And they will expire at the end of the contract, which will be the end of the, 9/2/2019 is the end date of the last block. So that's when it expires. And we have the start date that lines up. That looks good. And we're doing 2 hours per block because a block is 1 month, monthly blocks. And we're going to do $0 per hour here. We're not going to put 90, even though they are 90 per hour, because we're prepaying for that under the other monthly contract. The recurring contracts where the billing happens. The billing does not happen here for the upfront time. It's prepaid elsewhere. So that's very important that that's left at 0, or else we double bill them. We'll hit save and close, and voila, we're going to have lots of blocks here. So we get to see every single block category. There's 12 of them, 2 hours each. It's going to show how many hours are used, how many hours are remaining. It's very important to note that, yeah, and you can actually go back into the contracts, open it up, and click blocks on the left and get to this page. But just note that for hours used, the only time you're going to see anything is for posted, approved and posted time that's been basically billed. If we've worked on a ticket and haven't posted the time entries yet, it does not show up yet. So rates and multipliers. This is a very important screen. We're going to double check this and see what happens. And we found out that remote support after hours is set to pull out 150 hours for every 1 hour worked. That's a terrible ratio. We have to fix that. So we're going to go ahead and change that right now to 1.5. And for overages for remote support after hours, we actually bill that at 140 per hour. So we're going to fix that. 175 is our non-contract rate for that, which we don't really use, but 140 is what we should have. So we're going to hit save and close here. And that's going to set that time for just the overages. That's if we run out of time. Otherwise, we're going to do a 1.5 hour multiple, which at 90 an hour times 1.5 is actually 135 an hour. Emergency technician, we're going to double check and set that to 175 per hour. That is the in-contract rate for overages. It's a 1.5 multiplier, which is perfect. So that's exactly what we need. So we'll go ahead and save that. And we do see that the contract has an overage billing rate of $100 for everything else. So any other work type that is not covered by the recurring service contract, if we run out of prepaid time, it bills them at $100 per hour unless it's emergency technician or remote support after hours for our work type. So that's very important to understand how that billing works, especially when you're selling it and explaining it to a customer. All right, so next we have to figure out the relationship between these two contracts and how they work whenever a ticket's created. So you can see here there's a default service desk contract field, and nothing is selected here. There's no checkboxes here. So if we have to choose one of these, well, the very first one we're going to choose is the cloud environment and support or our gold protection plan. Whichever one is the recurring service contract, that's the one that's the default. So we're going to open it up and edit the contract. You can also right-click and edit. We check the box for default service desk contract. Super, super important here, guys. So we're going to save that. And we're going to actually show that it's now the default contract here on the other screen. Well, actually, we're going to exclusions first. So at this exclusion screen, what this really means is we're going to figure out which work types get covered by this contract, which ones we're going to do for free, and anything that's in the work types category on the left-hand side, those are going to be covered, and we actually will show up on the invoice as covered by contract. The default contract for exclusions is to say everything that's not covered, that's an excluded work type, what contract is that going to hit and how we're going to bill it. Well, that's going to go to the block hour contract because that deals with our rates and our overages and how much we charge for things that are not covered. So this list here is super critical to fix, what's covered and what's not. So we're going to go through this list one by one. It's a pretty extensive list of all of our work types, and it's pretty critical to understand the difference between these. So we're just going to do these one at a time. So the first one we're really going to start with is ads, and ads really are only used with our peace of mind contracts. That's basically stating that ads, moves, changes, or hardware failures, that MOC acronym, anything that is an ad, change, move, or hardware failure is excluded, not covered by a peace of mind contract. Therefore, it's definitely not covered with a gold contract. We do not want to do that type of work for free, so we're going to make that excluded. So if we happen to choose that work type, we are going to bill for it. So we're going to go ahead and fix all of this right now. So adds, changes, hardware failure, and moves, we're going to move those over to the excluded side. All right, next, anything that's non-billable, we want to keep that. We do not want to bill for non-billable work, so we want to show that up as covered by contract or not billable, so we leave that alone. In-shop support is anytime a customer brings a device into our office to fix. We'll use that for, like doing clones of solid states and things of that nature, just troubleshooting a broken device. We're going to bill for that, so that gets excluded. Maintenance is very important though. That's, if nothing else, and if you remember nothing else from this, maintenance is always covered. And maintenance tickets are going to be those types of tickets that, are automatically generated from and central backup alerts, let's see, antivirus alerts, patch alerts, all of that is going to be maintenance. So we definitely leave that. So the other two things we definitely know are excluded, which we talked about too, are the on-site after hours and the on-site after hours and remote after hours. So sorry guys, this is where my voice is getting a little weird for the voiceover because I recorded it once and didn't have the audio syncing, so dubbing over it. So just bear with me through this. We'll get through it together. All right. So we're going to get rid of on-site after hours. We know we have to charge for that. On-site support, we're certainly billing for on-site support. On-site 1.5 through on-site 4 is very critical. Those are probably not going to show up for this particular customer unless they have a site that's very far away. But that's just for billing at a higher rate for travel distances. Now, prepaid project work, we've learned recently that if we exclude prepaid project work, then it actually pulls that out of the block hour contract, which is not good. Prepaid work is for any project that we do a fixed price labor bid for, that the customer has billing that's separate. We want to actually make that covered. So it's super, super important to leave that, or else we're going to double dip and pull time out twice. We're going to remove remote support, remote after hours. Those are both billable items. Now, if we do remote support that's also a maintenance item, then we are not going to bill for it and we're going to code it as maintenance. But if it's remote support, that's something like, someone can't print, and we're going to dial into the computer remotely and fix that, we are going to charge for that. Remote non-contract really should not be a big deal, but if we happen to choose that work type, we definitely want to bill for it, but we shouldn't be using it. And the only other thing really is travel, and we've been trying to figure out how to deal with travel. Right now we're doing time entries for travel at the end of the day with our dispatch software, but if for any reason we did do a travel time entry, like say we drove 5 hours for a customer and we wanted to bill them, we could use travel as the work type, and therefore we're going to actually bill for that. So we're going to stick that under the excluded work types. So just look at this. We only have 5 things that are covered: general administration, maintenance, non-billable support, prepaid project work, and sales. We're going to save that. And it's just giving us an error message because our start date is after today's date, and now we're going to close this. When we refresh this, we're going to see that the cloud support contract has a checkbox for default. So every time a brand new ticket is created, it's going to automatically throw the ticket under the cloud environment and support contract. Then what's going to happen is the ticket's going to go and figure out, well, what work type are we using? Well, it's going to say, is it one of these covered work types? If so, it's going to keep it under this contract. If it's not one of these work types, and it happens to be an excluded work type over here on the right, then it's going to go to the block hour contract for billing. So then it checks the block hour contract and says, okay, how do I bill for this? Well, it first off checks to see if it's a emergency technician rate or remote after hours rate, but it also checks to see if we have any blocks remaining. So if we have block hours remaining, then it figures out what work type it is and how are we going to bill for it. It checks rates and multipliers and says, is it emergency technician or remote after hours? If so, we're going to bill the 1.5 multiple. But if we're out of time, we're going to bill at 175 per hour or 140 per hour. If it happens to be one of the other work types, then it's going to bill it at, well, it's going to cover it first, but if it runs out of time, it's going to bill at the overage rate down at the bottom that you see for $100 per hour. And here I am rambling on and on the first video, so just bear with me until we're done because I've got nothing else to say right now. All right. So that's pretty much it with the relationship and how this works. You got to make sure we have the 2 contracts in place, and that's it. Thanks, guys. I hope it's helpful.